Unfortunately, I've known some people that have been promoted to their level of incompetency. And the problem with that is once they reach that level, typically they're not going to get back. They're not going to get stepped backwards to the next level they came from. Usually they remain in that level for many years.
Enchanted Sky Media.
From the Enchanted Sky Studios in Prescott, Arizona, this is Code 3, the Firefighters Podcast, hosted by award-winning journalist Scott Orr. Code 3 features interviews with leading members of the fire service, discussing firefighting strategies, tactics, and other topics you need to know more about. Now, here's Scott.
That's right, and I will not let Parkinson stop me. Thank you for joining me again here on Code 3. You are listening to the show for and about firefighters. Let's get started. You know, there are a lot of books about management styles available, but for my money, the ones written by firefighters are the best. They're specific, they're full of real-world examples, and they aren't just page after page of the author's latest catchphrases. Take this one, for example, Fully Involved Leadership, the new book by Chief Gary Ludwig. It explains concepts that any member of the fire service can use to become a strong leader, from how to keep your emotions under control in stressful situations to good decision-making. And Gary does it by storytelling. As far as I'm concerned, that's the best way to make an idea stick. Gary has 4 decades of experience in the fire service. He's currently chief of the Champaign, Illinois Fire Department. He figures he's responded to an estimated 25,000 fire rescue and EMS calls during his career. And Gary Ludwig joins me now. Welcome back to Code 3.
It's an honor to be here, Scott.
Is there a lack of solid leadership in today's fire service?
You know, one of the problems that we have in the fire service is that our leadership education is not structured. If you look at the military, they're very structured. They have a set methodology by which they teach their officers, whether they go through the academy or whether they go through some other type of officer school. And once they're done at the academy and once they're done with officer school, they're not done with their education. There is a structured format by which they're taught their disciplines and their areas of concentration and in leadership itself. Whereas if you look at the fire service, sometimes a department will, if you've done better than somebody else on a test, well, you get promoted. You're kind of thrown into the seat, as we say, without the benefit of any type of education or any type of training in leadership or how to handle personnel issues, which is actually the majority of what you're going to do in the fire service. Yeah, we have some opportunities out there, such as National Fire Academy. They have their Executive Fire Officer program. We have some various colleges that teach education and leadership, but there is no structured format to answer your question about leadership when it comes to educating our fire officers.
Now, why do you think that is? It seems like it would be easy enough to start a program like that to educate them. And I imagine there might be a few departments that do that already, but why isn't it widespread?
Well, I think they've tried to get there through what we call our FESHI program. There's a FESHI model, which deals with how to and what should be structured format for educational degree programs. But within that educational degree, is not always, it's some leadership, but it's not always all concentrated on leadership itself. So one of the things that we don't truly have is a structural format for dealing with leadership issues within the fire service. We have programs that are available, as I said, and some departments have some very good programs. They have company officer academies. They have chief officer academies. Usually you find that in your larger departments. But the smaller departments don't have the benefit of that. Unfortunately, a lot of people get promoted. They do better than somebody else on a test. And next thing they're thrown into the seat and expected to perform.
Or in some cases, they get up there and when they get there, they can't perform.
Yeah, and it's called the Peter Principle. Sometimes we're promoted to our level of incompetence. But, hopefully as even though someone's been promoted to that level, that hopefully they take the initiative to try to educate themselves about leadership principles, or again, the department itself makes availability for them to go to classes or go to seminars or go to conferences to learn about leadership issues.
I'm glad you mentioned the Peter Principle. That's exactly where I was going there.
Unfortunately, I've known some people that have been promoted to their level of incompetency. And the problem with that is once they've reached that level, typically they're not going to get back. They're not going to get stepped backwards to the next level they came from. Usually they remain in that level for many years.
Yeah, and then everybody around them pays the price. How are today's leaders different than, say, a generation ago?
Well, I think that we have made progress. Leadership, when I started like 41 years ago, it seemed like the battalion chiefs were God and the deputy chiefs were somewhere above God. And I don't know what classification you would put fire chiefs in, because, it was these autocratic, these very non-benevolent ways of leading, militaristic, hardcore-nosed attitudes that our chiefs had some 40 years ago. I think they were basically emulating the chiefs that came before them. And so, one of the things that I think has evolved over the years is that our leadership and our methods for educating our leaders has gotten better, but we still have some ways that we have to go.
So does that mean that there are people leading today of both styles? Some of them are just still very autocratic. Some of them are what those autocrats would consider to be too wishy-washy.
I still hear from quite a few people, especially people that purchase my book, that they work under autocratic, dictatorial type of style of leadership from their chiefs. And their chiefs have this attitude of it's going to be my way or the highway, or, basically that, you are here. I don't want to hear you. I expect you to carry out my orders directly, even though it's not an emergency scene. I can understand if it's an emergency scene, but on a non-emergency scene, there's an opportunity to, as an organization, discuss things and groups that can discuss things. And let's figure this out before we move down a path that might be wrong.
Is your book designed to kind of bring some of these people into the 21st century then?
Yes, my book is, I would think, a method by which it's not your typical leadership book, that discusses the principles of leadership and all the other issues that you find out there in your, what I call your boring textbooks. My book is real life, real examples of leadership issues that impact the fire service. And as an example, I always had qualms with leaders in the fire service who think that anytime a firefighter does something wrong, that they have to be disciplined. We're beginning to realize, and we should realize, that firefighters when something goes wrong, it's not because the firefighter intentionally did it or did it with malicious intent or they were reckless. So a lot of times they have multiple choices. They can choose A, B, or C on their decision making. And they chose B, and maybe A was a better choice. Well, they shouldn't get disciplined for that. A lot of times there's something wrong with the system. And one of the things I advocate in the book is if we fix the system, the problems will go away. Instead of trying to fix the firefighter, we need to fix the system. We wonder why we discipline a firefighter on something, and then 6 months later, another firefighter does the same exact thing wrong. And it's going to be expected. Unless you fix what's wrong with the system, then you're still going to continue to have problems. I'll give you a classic example, Scott. So when I worked in a department, this is my third department now. One of the departments I worked in, if you were to back your engine up and hit the door frame of the engine house, it was an automatic 24-hour suspension. And so that firefighter would get a 24-hour suspension. Then maybe 6 months later, another firefighter would back the engine up into the engine house, and they hit the door frame. And guess what? They get a 24-hour suspension. So, the question is, are firefighters really hitting door frames on purpose? I don't think so. So one of the things you need to do is fix the system. So in order to fix the system, one of the things that you should be trying to do is, as an example, let's put spotters back there that can spot and tell the driver when they're about to hit the door frame. And let's protect some of those spotters. Sometimes, they don't have to be standing directly in the path of the engine. They can be off to the side, but have some type of communication device that they can communicate with the driver. I'll end by saying, instead of fixing the firefighter, let's fix the system.
So tell me what you're seeing in terms of today's young leaders. I mean, it's about time now that millennials are beginning to step up into leadership roles. What are you seeing out of them?
Actually, I think that our millennial generation, contrary to what some people say, that they're lazy and a bunch of other things, I actually say that the millennials are probably the smartest, the most brightest, the most educated group of firefighters that we're going to see. And they're problem solvers. They critically think. They have great critical thinking skills. They know that anything they have to be able to find a solution for, they know how to look it up on the internet and Google it. And so along with that comes the downside. Maybe their social skills aren't as good as what you and I might have growing up because we were forced to talk to people. Now they communicate a lot of things by texting each other. I've sat and watched my children text with each other in the same room, and I thought maybe they're just trying to keep information away from me. And it turns out, no, they're just how they communicated at that particular time, sitting in the same room and they're texting to each other. I think the future's bright. I think the millennials that are coming up these days are some of the brightest, most educated kids in the fire service. And so I think the future's bright with them. I think they are a very good group of kids who are going to step into leadership roles. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you the example of why I say this, Scott. Unfortunately, I saw kids in my age group when I was growing up, they would pick on some kid in school who was disadvantaged. And everybody thought that was cool and everybody thought that was fun. I thought it was horrendous. But they would pick on some kid that might have had some difficulties. And I queen or the king of the prom. They usually elect to put that kid with Down syndrome as the prom queen or king. I've seen them already on the football field. That maybe the kid with Down syndrome, is one of the trainers, or maybe somebody that, doesn't play on the football team or on the baseball team. But you know what? They get them out there, and you probably have seen those videos already.
Oh, yeah, I've seen them.
They get them out there, and they let them score a touchdown. And I get goosebumps when I see that because I just think that's outstanding. And that's that generation today that's doing that. And I think that is a great leadership skill, that we lift others up. We help others who are struggling, and we help others, that we lift them up. And we have firefighters from time to time that are struggling. We have firefighters who need lifting, that need support, that need that encouragement. And I think these millennials coming into these leadership roles are suited for that, just exactly in that role.
So then your book addresses their issues or their questions so that they can get something out of it also. Does it also apply to, let's say, the crusty old guys who are still in offices?
Yes, because I'll tell you what, I'm glad you asked that question, Scott, because my last chapter is pretty interesting. And my last chapter talks about who's going to write the final chapter of your career. And it's not going to be you. It's going to be the firefighters that you lead. It's going to be the crusty old guy who's in the battalion chief position or the fire chief position or in some type of leadership role. They don't get to write the final chapter of their career. It's the firefighters that they led and who they worked for. They get to write that final chapter. And it may not be as flattering as what you think. I've been in departments that I never met the individual, but somebody that worked in the department 30 years ago, they are talked about in such highest regard. Still 30 years later, it's passed down from generation to generation of firefighters about some chief and how they led people. Or the reverse of that, as I've heard about people that I never met that might have worked in some department 30, 40 years ago, that they still talk about with disdain and hatred because the person was that bad. And so you may think you get to write the final chapter of your career. That's illogical thinking, because the firefighters that you work for get to write the final chapter of your career.
All right. The book is Fully Involved Leadership. Gary Ludwig, always great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, it's an honor, Scott. And my book is available on Amazon. You can order it there either through ebook or a paper copy or the soft cover. Or if you want a signed copy, you can go to my website, GaryLudwigBook.com, and I can send you a signed copy. So it's always an honor and privilege to be on with you, Scott. You're doing a great job, and thank you for getting that information out to our firefighters out there.
And we put a link to order his book on our website at code3podcast.com/Ludwig. Check it out. All right, that's it. That's all for this edition of Code 3. This time we talked about leadership as explained in Gary Ludwig's new book. What do you think makes for a great leader? What qualities make one that's not so good? And of the strongest leaders you know, what qualities do they have? I'd like to hear from you on this. As always, email me, Scott at code3podcast.com, or leave a voicemail at 562-337-9902. I'll read your comments and play your messages on a future show. Hey, thank you for listening. I'll be back next time with more. I'm Scott Orr, and until then, stay safe.
Code 3 is a production of Enchanted Sky Media. To contact us, get more information on today's topic, or subscribe to the podcast, go to code3podcast.com.